Good evening, everyone. We are very excited to have you out here today, or tonight, this evening. So my name is Khalid Smith, and I am proud to be a co-chair of the Focus 203 Steering Committee. Melanie Manning, my fellow co-chair, and I will serve as your host for this event. To give you a little background about myself, I am a principal systems architect at CSG, which is a global leader in providing business support solutions for many of the largest cable and telecom providers in the world. Yeah, we build software. I've lived in Naperville for 8 years with my wife, Tamika, and our 2 children, a freshman and a junior, attending Naperville North High School. And a third who graduated from Naperville North and is currently set to graduate in May and is moving to San Jose, California to take a job. So I just thought I'd throw that plug in there for him. So he's no longer coming home, which is what I'm proud of. It is important to me to be active in the community. And in that capacity, I'm a founder of the Success Parent Organization, an active 100 Black Men of Chicago mentor, a member of the District of 203 Diversity Committee, and a recent volunteer for the DuPage NAACP Junior AXO Achievement Program. I always look forward to these Focus 203 events and hope that everyone feels their voices heard. With that, I will let Melanie introduce herself.
Hello, as Clete said, my name is Melanie Manning. I am originally from Joliet and graduated from Naperville High School. I got my BA in English from the University of Illinois, then went to law school at John Marshall. After law school, I practiced in Joliet at Tracy Johnson Wilson and then the Will County State's Attorney's Office. And I was active in children's school and with the Joliet Junior Women's Club. In 2014, my husband and I moved to Naperville with our 2 children, and I became a stay-at-home mom. Our son, Holden, is in 3rd grade at River Woods, and our daughter, Helena, is a freshman at Naperville Central High School. As with Clete, community service is something that's near and dear to my heart. I think it's very important. And I'm glad I get to be involved. I am on the Women's School Board at Riverwoods, at Naperville Central. I am Vice President of Membership for the National Charity League here in Naperville, and I'm be a co-chair of this committee as well. I enjoy the fruitful discussions that take place at our Focus 203 events, and hope everyone has an engaging time with us tonight.
So many of you have attended these Focus 203 sessions in the past and are familiar with the process. So just by a show of hands, who has attended one of these events before? Awesome. So thanks for coming back, for sure. But for those of you who are new to our engagement series, I'd like to take a moment to explain our format. Each of our sessions will follow a timed agenda. Each session will start with an informational presentation about the topic chosen for the workshop, followed by a small group work activity giving you the opportunity to respond to the presentation. It is important to note that these sessions will not be conducive to the format of an open forum or debate. They are work sessions focused on results and reaching consensus or collective decisions as a group. We want to maximize our time to be as positive and productive as possible while still allowing for the free exchange of ideas. The intent is to involve a large number of people that is as representative of the community as possible. So here is how the process will be documented. When you arrive, you should have received a packet of information including a copy of the presentation. As a table group, you will discuss and answer the questions as a collective group to share out. Following our presentation tonight, we will prepare verbatim responses from each small group worksheet and an executive summary reflecting the collective work of all participants at the session. We will also post a video presentation on the district's website.
As just mentioned, all Focus 203 materials and documents will be posted on the district website under the Our District tab, and then the Community Engagement and Focus 203. We also want to take this opportunity to let you know that Naperville 203 has a very robust social media presence on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. New content is going up on social media along with the district website frequently, so please check it out regularly to stay current. We know your time is very valuable, and it is our goal to have each session end on time or earlier. We've planned a very tight agenda and have a lot to cover in a very short period of time. If during this process you have questions or comments, please use the sheets of paper that are on each of your tables to capture your thoughts. If during the small group time we are not able to respond, please turn in that form. We will have the appropriate person from the district respond to you in a timely manner. And with that, I'd like to bring up Superintendent Dan Bridges to the podium.
Good evening, and thank you very much for making time to be a part of this conversation this evening. It means a lot to me, the school district, as well as the Board of Education, that you are engaged with us and a part of the conversation on diversity and inclusion. A little bit more background on this process for those of you that are new. The process originated back in 2013 as we sought to hear the voice of our community, to hear feedback from you, all of our stakeholders in developing our strategic blueprint, our way forward. And the commitment to ongoing diversity and inclusion plan was an outcome of that feedback that we heard from the community back in 2013. Since the original series, we have continued to focus 203 format to continue to talk about topics of relevance in our school district and throughout our community. Many times we come to you with topics or things that we feel like we're doing pretty well with. We want to know how we get better, how we go from good, how we go from good to great. Tonight we're coming to you with a topic that we are committed to and is an extremely high priority for us, but we have a lot of area for growth. And you being a part of this conversation is very important to us to help us think about how we get better moving forward and how we create a school district and a community that embraces diversity and fully supports inclusion in this community. This is an important conversation in our community right now. How many of you attended the community conversation with Councilman Betty White last night? Few of you. Good. So you can see that there were about 120 folks that attended that meeting over in the Municipal Center last night. This is a community that I think at this time understands the importance of having honest, candid conversation about diversity and inclusion. We're going to have some honest conversations at your tables, so I think it's important to get to know each other a little bit. I can ask you to tell your whole life story, but in the spirit of diversity, inclusion, and being unique, we're going to ask you, hopefully you've already had an opportunity to introduce yourself by name, so you know by name the people that you're sitting with. If not, you're going to get that chance. I want you to think about one thing that you think makes you unique. It really doesn't have to be, you're the only person in the world with this characteristic trait or thing about you. But something that you think helps define who you are. An important trait for me is, I'm a dad. My two kids, they drive everything that I do, right? And they have for 4 years, so that's an important part of who I am. So I want you to think about what's an important characteristic about you that makes you unique. Introduce yourself to your table mates. We're gonna do this really quick. Don't overthink this. Just share something with you about 2 minutes to have this quick conversation and break the ice with those that you're sitting with. seconds, I'll bring you back together. And in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for having that quick conversation. If you didn't get to finish, when we get to the work session, please make that your first priority and let the people at your table who didn't get a chance to introduce themselves do so and share that unique thing. And for that handful of you that didn't, here's your extra time to think about that. Okay, our outcomes for this evening, what you hope is accomplished, what we hope is accomplished for you tonight, is for you to understand why there's a focus on diversity and inclusion in our school district, to understand what Naperville 203's priorities and initiatives related to diversity and inclusion will be, and for you as our community and our stakeholders to provide input on ways Naperville 203 can better serve our diverse community. During a previous Focus 203, we described the systems and supports we have in place to ensure that every student grows from year to year and every student is achieving third grade level standards. Presentation specifically targeted how teachers collaborate to identify students who need additional teaching and learning with grade level content and skills, students who need extensions to enhance the complexity of the grade level content and skills, and the students who demonstrate proficiency with grade level standards and are ready for acceleration to the next level of learning. The presentation focused on what happens within the general education classroom for all our students. And in March, Dr. Igo and Mrs. Willard introduced you to programs and services that support students with engagement in the core curriculum outside of the typical general education classroom. They highlighted programs that allow students to learn the core curriculum, sometimes in a different language, or at an accelerated pace, or within a different structure to the school day. Each program is uniquely designed to meet the academic and social emotional needs of the students it serves. We have focused on our commitment to meet the unique learning needs of our diverse student population. But when we talk about all students, it's important to note who our students are today. The illustration on this slide comes from the 2017-2018 Illinois Interactive Report Card for Naperville 203. And this table provides a snapshot of the characteristics of the nearly 17,000 students in our school district. And while it's important to know who the children are that we serve today, there's a lot to learn from taking a look back at how this profile has changed over time. This illustration on this slide comes from the very first Future Focus 203 presentation ever given, the one in 2013 I referenced in my opening comments. And it's our State of the District presentation for that year. And the theme of that series of presentations was who we are, what we do, and how we do it are all changing. And we noted some pretty significant shifts in our student population over just a decade. As you can see, our percent of white students decreased from 83% to just under 69%. Our Black and Hispanic populations more than doubled over that time. But the most dramatic change was seen in the percent of students who qualified for a free or reduced lunch. In 2000, just over 1% of our students were eligible. And in 2012, that number was over 11%. And at that time, to the surprise of some and to the surprise of others throughout our community, I stated I expected that trend to continue. So let's go back to what our student demographics for the 2017-2018 report card looked like. And as I stated back in 2013, our racial, ethnic, and economic diversity continues to increase. Note the increases in our Hispanic, our multiracial, and low-income student populations. Adding to this diversity, about 7% of our students are identified as English learners, and 11% of our students have a disability. Additionally, about 1% of our students are homeless. And while that percent seems small, that's about 150 students in our schools at any given time that are homeless. While our student demographic has changed over time, our certified educator demographics do not mirror that shift. Over 90% of our licensed educators are white. According to Linda Darling-Hammond, Stanford Professor Emeritus and President of the Learning Policy Institute, increasing teacher diversity is a very important strategy for improving learning for students of color and for closing achievement gaps. While white students also benefit from learning from teachers of color, the impact is especially significant for students of color, who have higher test scores, are more likely to graduate high school, and are more likely to succeed in college when they have had teachers of color who serve as role models and support their attachment to school and learning. Students with racially diverse teachers also have fewer unexcused absences and are less likely to be chronically absent. We recognize this is an important priority for us in helping us to close achievement gaps and to create an environment committed to inclusion. Dr. Leeds will speak on this a little bit more later on in our presentation. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Naperville 203's Assistant Superintendent of Assessment and Accountability, Dr. Patrick Nolan. Dr. Nolan will share student information, our student achievement information with you. Dr. Nolan.
My name is Patrick, and I've been asked to, first of all, thanks for coming out here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I know a lot of people have a lot of activities going on, and it's warmer weather, but it's a pleasure to be here. I want to share some assessment data with you, and that assessment data covers how students have performed at the elementary, junior high, and high school level during the last academic year, so during the 2018 school year. We're going to look specifically at English language arts, people used to call reading and writing, and also mathematics as well. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to talk about student gaps, and the definition really of a student gap has to do with differences in performance, differences in the percentage of students that are proficient across different student groups. So that's kind of our working definition of what a gap is. And you'll see those visually in a second. I said that we are looking at data collected in the spring of 2018. It includes students in 3rd through 8th grade, so all of our elementary schools and junior high schools. And then it also will include data from our last year's junior class when they took the SAT as well. We clear the bar in terms of participation. We have roughly 98 to 99% of students in this district participating in these assessments. So one question you always want to ask is everybody taking the test? In our case, absolutely. There are very few exceptions to that, so I just want you to know that this reflects the vast majority of our student population. And one last thing about this, we are looking at a single data point. We're not looking at longitudinal data over time. We're looking at how students did last year, not how students did going back 18, 17, 16, and so forth. I'm going to use this, try to use this approved laser pointer with the Naperville green color on this. I don't think it's going to actually work on that, so I might point to a few things, but I'm going to do it on this screen over here. I decided to use a stacked bar graph to show you some of our achievement gaps, and it's important to notice that we're talking about elementary and junior high school students. And I know you probably can't read this, but it says English language arts literacy. Like I said before, that's what people used to call reading and writing. And so, again, this is these are student groups. Can anybody read those words? Maybe on the large one you can, but we're looking at white, African American, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Asian, 2 or more races, economic disadvantage, English learner, and then disability. So those are categories of students that we evaluate in terms of their performance. These numbers are percentages, and the lighter green stack is the state percentage of students that were proficient last year, 3rd through 8th, on what used to be called the PARC assessment. It's now called the IAR. So we're looking at former 3rd through 8th, English language arts literacy, and that's about, what, a 47. So you can say in the state of Illinois, about 1 in 2 kids were proficient that happened to be white on the state assessment last year for junior high and elementary school. This number up here, I think it's a 73. It was 73, I can't even read from here. It's in the mid-70s. That reflects the percentage of students in this district. About 3 out of 4 white students were proficient, which means they either met or exceeded learning standards on last year's accountability test. And then you can sort of visually look through here and see variation at the state level of performance. Then you can see variation in our performance based on those groups. So these are, I just want people to understand, these are percentages. They're not averages. They're not like some other kind of score. It's an actual percentage of students at the district level and the state level. You can see that these gaps exist both at the state level as well as at the local level. So this phenomenon of looking at achievement differences and gaps, if we're looking, for example, at African American white gap, you can see that that gap also exists at the state level as well. If we had national data, you'd see differences nationally on nationally administered tests. Not making excuses, not justifying it, just being really clear on the fact that this is not a local phenomenon. I think I said enough pretty much about it. Let me move on to the next slide. This is, again, we're at elementary and junior high school achievement gap, and this actually says, if you had a Hubble telescope, it says mathematics, and again, broken down by white, African American, black, Hispanic, Latino, and so on by groups. You can visually see how the state performed in terms of percentage, and then what percentage of our students meet or exceed on the standards line accountability assessment. And when we talk about gaps, we're talking about differences in student achievement and performance level. You'll notice similar gaps if I flip back to the ELA slide. This profile looks similar. That rank order of Asians being higher performing, followed by white, followed by Hispanic, followed by black, that's something that's seen not only at the state level, at the district level, but also nationally as well. So that that's not this profile in terms of who's the highest achieving, followed by who's second, who's third, who's fourth. That's not unusual at all in terms of if you looked at other data sets with more students across Illinois or the country. This next slide, this is our high school achievement gap. This is based on the SAT. This is a test that's taken by all juniors in the spring. It's required for graduation. And this was administered to our now seniors, last year's juniors. And you can again see in the area of English language arts and literature, the profile of performance by differing student group. This is interesting down here. If you can actually read that, it says English learners at the state level. 1% of students that qualify for English learner services are meeting proficiency standards as measured by the SAT. Locally, that's actually at 8%. So you can kind of see differences in performance relative to state and local percentages. Another thing to be aware of is when groups have very few numbers of students, so when they have, if they're generally speaking a smaller number of students, how an individual student performs has a vastly bigger influence on that percentage, right? If we have a very few number of students that take a test and they're either proficient or not, you can imagine how that can swing that percentage higher or lower year to year. So I'm just saying there's more variability in student groups that have less kids if you look at it across time. But nevertheless, the gap is there. The next slide is SAT. I promised my last one. It's mathematics. And again, you can see the student groups, you can see performance differences, the state profile, the lighter green, and then the Naperville 203 darker green profile of student performance as well in terms of percentage. If you're interested in this type of data, it actually doesn't look this way, but if you Google Illinois Report Card, or if you go to illinoisreportcard.com, you can take a look at this type of information along with a lot of other metrics, accountability metrics that have nothing to do with achievement, but have to do with school performance that we're held accountable for. So illinoisreportcard.com, you can look at our district, you can look at individual schools, you can look at other districts and other schools, lots of information. I just want to say a few words about our gap closing efforts, and I tried to organize this slide around really four broad brush, areas of focus that result in student outcomes. And I know the last four slides have really emphasized academic achievement. We're obviously interested in emotional development, behavioral development, social development, not just academic performance. But we know they're all related to each other. This really reflects our use of research-based, evidence-based supports. We're doing things that have some merit or backing in science, right? There's evidence that these practices work and are effective with students. Our SEL efforts really focus on authentic sense of belonging. That means we want students to feel like they're part of the community, whether it's individual or collective. We're interested in them feeling like they're part of something that matters and that their presence matters and makes a difference. We know that makes a difference in terms of outcomes. A high-quality curriculum, a standards-aligned curriculum, and rigorous instruction is obviously part of how we make progress on achievement gap closing. And then lastly, parent partnerships. We're very obviously engaged in involving parents and getting parents to become a part of their students' academic experience so they're knowledgeable, aware, and they can support and contribute to our efforts towards student outcomes. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. At this point, I would like to introduce Dr. Rakita Lees, and she is our Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion.
Good evening, District 203 families, staff, and all other concerned community members. I am pleased to have this opportunity to formally introduce myself and engage with our community stakeholders. share a little bit about my personal and professional background so that you get to know me better. I am a mom of an active and inquisitive little girl named Madison. I am a native Chicagoan and alumna of the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, where I received my bachelor's and master's degrees. I received my doctorate in Education, Administration, Leadership, and Policy from Fordham University in New York City. I have experience as a classroom teacher, an assistant principal, educational consultant, and school district leader. Most recently, I spent 4 years in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools' HR department as the executive director of sourcing and onboarding. And prior to that, I spent 6 years working in New York City's Department of Education in its HR department as well, ending my tenure there as the Senior Director of Teacher Recruitment and Applicant Services. From these roles, I bring experience in developing and executing strategic, targeted recruitment efforts to diversify school districts' workforce, and implementing district-wide implicit bias and cultural competency training for district leaders, which I will certainly leverage in my current role as District 203's Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion. To ensure that we all have a common understanding of the meaning of the terms diversity, inclusion, and equity, which will be used frequently throughout this presentation, I will briefly define them. Think of diversity as the who and what. Diversity includes all the ways in which people differ, encompassing the different characteristics that make one individual or group different from another. While diversity is often used in reference to race, ethnicity, and gender, it also includes age, national origin, religion, ability or disability, LGBTQ+ status, which means lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, socioeconomic status, education, marital status, language, immigrant status, and physical appearance. Additionally, it includes diversity of thought, such as ideas, perspectives, and values. This is a broad definition of diversity. Last school year, prior to my tenure at 203, the Diversity Advisory Committee, which is comprised of 2 representatives from each school, including a parent or caregiver and a staff person, as well as representation from the Board of Education and district leadership, collectively and formally define District 203's definition of diversity. It reads, diversity includes the recognition of the range of human differences and experiences in individuals and groups. This definition captures the broader definition of diversity in a very concise and succinct manner. Inclusion is how you leverage the diversity that you have in an organization or group. It is the act of creating environments in which any individual or group can be and feel welcomed, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate. An inclusive and welcoming environment embraces differences and offers respect in words and actions for all people. It's important to note that while an inclusive group is by definition diverse, a diverse group isn't always inclusive. An inclusive culture acknowledges the unique experiences and perspectives each individual brings to the table. People feel valued and know that their voices are being heard. Inclusion helps us move from counting such as diversity statistics to cultivating. Having diversity isn't the same as experiencing the value of diversity. Representation itself is not enough. Verna Meyer who is a diversity expert, often says, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. So how will we get to the point where we can get everyone on the dance floor? Equity is the fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. Improving equity involves increasing justice and fairness in the formal and informal policies, practices, and procedures within our school district. Tackling issues of equity helps us to create an understanding of the root causes of those income disparities. Take a look at the image on the screen and what do you think it means? This image illustrates the point that equity does not mean that everyone gets the same. Instead, equity means that everyone gets what they need. Yet, our ultimate goal is to get rid of the barriers that created the inequities. In this example, changing the type of fence allows everyone to see without the need of additional supports and still holds intact a fence that protects them from fly-off. We have a lot of reasons to be proud to be affiliated with District 203. We have committed, hard-working staff. We are well-resourced. We have a robust offering of co-curricular activities, and our academic programs are envied by many. We certainly have a lot to celebrate, but we must acknowledge and address the areas in which we have missed the mark and have fallen short of greatness. Superintendent Bridges and Dr. Nolan share some statistics that highlight the areas in which we have not lived up to our full potential. When I joined District 203, I was shown this data immediately. I knew that in order to eradicate such significant disparities and gaps, I first had to understand how they came to be. History matters. Context matters. I wanted to hear directly from families, staff, former and current students, and community leaders. I particularly sought out individuals who were part of marginalized and underserved groups in our district. I listened to their stories and heard their perspectives. I learned about how they have experienced the district. They told me what they love about 203, but more importantly, they told me what they need and how the district might better support them. As I listened to them, I was deliberate in trying to uncover what we as a district are doing or not doing to contribute to inequities. I quickly realized that some groups have experienced times when we were not as inclusive or equitable as we should be. That might be hard to hear and accept, especially if you have experienced the best of Naperville 203. Among those who I spoke to, I found generally that people of color, especially those who identify as Black or Latinx, as well as people who identify as LGBTQ+, and Muslims in our community, do not always feel welcomed, respected, or included in the district and or their schools. I would like to use this platform to share a few of their stories. But before I share, I invite you all to listen for understanding. We all view the world through tinted lenses that are colored by our background and life experiences. So as you listen, consider the lens in which they view the world, and think about what we can learn from each story. In one instance, a Black elementary school student says to his parent, "I know that a Black man can be president, but are they allowed to be teachers?" Take a moment and think about the impact the lack of a diverse teacher workforce has had on this student and others. In another story, a parent shared that a teacher had given students a list of terrorist groups to look up in Google at home. The assigned list included some radical Islamic nationalist groups, and some of the students assigned this task were Muslim. The parent who shared this story with me saw the value in students learning about the evils of radical terrorist groups, including those who claim to represent Islam. But they were deeply concerned that their Muslim child would be asked to Google these groups at home. They sincerely feared that the FBI could be at their door. What might we learn from this situation? How can we be better aware and considerate of our students' lived experiences and cultural dynamics as we develop activities and identify resources and materials to support their learning? Another parent warned educators not to assume that because students are achieving well, they do not need any other support. She noted that Indian students might experience high stress because of academic expectations. She had great concern about these students' social and emotional well-being. A parent of a transgender student noted the hetero lens in health education and the lack of resources to support parents to have those conversations with LGBTQ+ youth at home, and stressed the need for greater sensitivity for children who have not yet undergone the legal name change or medical attention. The last story that I will share is an example of a microaggression. Microaggressions are the everyday verbal, nonverbal, and environmental slights, snubs, or insults, whether intentional or unintentional, which communicate negative messages to its target based solely upon their marginalized group membership. 203 parents shared that one year they were unable to meet their son's teacher prior to parent-teacher conference. Their son, who happens to be a Black male elementary student, brought home a note that his teacher wrote to his parents. In the note, the teacher recommended that the parents spend more time reading to him and a lot less time for using technology and playing video games. Although I do not know this teacher personally, it is very likely that the teacher had good intentions and wanted to share best practices to support the child at home. However, the parent found the unsolicited advice odd, especially since her child did not have any major academic or behavioral concerns. So she called other parents in the class to see if they had received similarly written notes home. They had not. Instead of getting to know the family, the teacher seemingly made several assumptions about them. In reality, they are a low-tech family of academics. One parent has a PhD in history, and they read to their children often. I shared a small sampling of the many stories that I heard to shed light on the experiences of underrepresented groups in 203 that quantitative data alone alone would not reveal. In these stories, no one meant anyone else any intentional harm, yet the impact is still the same. We know we have areas of concern, but let's celebrate our commitment to improvement. We need to grow, but we are on it. Naperville 203's board policy and strategic blueprint have clear expectations related to diversity and inclusion. As a district, our next step is to create plans and identify specific strategies and initiatives to meet those expectations. In collaboration with the Diversity Advisory Committee, the district leadership team, including principals and assistant principals, we developed a draft diversity and inclusion statement to publicly declare a commitment to creating and sustaining diversity, inclusion, and equity in our school district. Our collaborators stress that the statement should reflect the following: that it should include the district's definition of diversity, connect to the district's existing beliefs or mission statement, use strong language such as affirm and appreciate, be concise and succinct, move away from buzzwords because it should stand the test of time, should be inclusive of all groups without listing specific groups, clearly state our why, specify how it will benefit students, and hold the district accountable to address inequities and discrimination. The statement reads, Naperville Community Unit School District 203 appreciates, affirms, and is inclusive of the range of differences in people and ideas. Cultivating a culture of inclusion exemplifies our belief that an exemplary school district values the dignity and uniqueness of each individual. We are committed to creating an environment where diversity and inclusion is evident in who we are and what we do. We seek to identify and address inequities in all forms of discrimination and intolerance. We believe it is the responsibility of our school district to offer students a diverse set of experiences and perspectives that will better prepare them to thrive in an inclusive global community and world. When finalized, this statement, along with Board Policy 2.142 and Strategic Blueprint Indicators 220B, will be used to guide any future equity plans or goal setting to ensure alignment when identifying strategies or initiatives to address inequities. During the small group activities section, we would like to get the community's feedback about this statement. Based on student data and qualitative feedback that we received from diverse 203 stakeholder groups, we have identified the following areas as the most high leverage, impactful areas to close learning gaps and fulfill the district's commitments as outlined in Board Policy 2.142, Strategic Blueprint 220B, and the Draft Diversity and Inclusion Statement. The 4 priorities include examine systemic inequities, district-wide implicit bias training, a curriculum review, and examine recruitment and hiring practices. Priority Area 1, examine systemic inequities. We will examine our current policies and practices to identify and eliminate institutional biases and norms through systemic, ongoing, and authentic work. Priority Area 2, district-wide implicit bias training. Implicit bias trainings demonstrate how people make and sometimes act on snap judgments based on the other person's identity group without conscious intention. Implicit bias often operates subconsciously. Generally, we do not even realize that we are being biased. However, unconsciously based decisions, especially those made by educators, can affect students' life trajectories. If you are interested in learning more, Harvard University has an implicit association test, the IAT, that is available online and it is free. I recommend that each of you take one or more of those tests to learn about any implicit biases that you might have. Priority Area 3, a curriculum review. Culture is central to learning. It plays a role not only in communicating and receiving information, but also in shaping the thinking process of groups and individuals. A pedagogy that acknowledges, responds to, and celebrates the fundamental cultures that they offer full, equitable access to education for all students from all cultures. Priority Area 4, examine recruitment and hiring practices. District 203's workforce, especially teachers and school leaders, are not reflective of the student population that we serve. Workplace diversity lends itself to increased innovation and better results. Research has shown that historically underserved student groups, particularly Black boys, as well as those within the general student population, benefit greatly from having teachers from diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural groups. More specifically, a recent longitudinal study was done that found that assigning a Black male to a Black teacher in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th grades significantly reduces the probability that he drops out of high school, particularly among those who are economically disadvantaged as well. Exposure to at least one Black teacher in grades 3 through 5 also increases the likelihood that persistently low-income students of both genders aspires to attend a 4-year college. In order to advance this work, we have looked into strategic partnerships like the organizations listed on this slide, to provide additional expertise and build our capacity to achieve our desired outcomes. We have also expanded our outreach to external community organizations to better support marginalized and underrepresented groups in our district. However, we know that this is not an exhaustive list. We would like your help in identifying additional community organizations that are not listed that will help us to be more inclusive of those marginalized groups in 203. We also know that Naperville 203 can't address these issues alone. We rely on our partnerships and we rely on our community, including students, staff, families, and others. We need each other to do this work well. Thank you for your time. Now, I would like to welcome back Khalid and Melanie to the podium.
Let's give another round of applause to all of our students. Really good information that was shared. Thank you all. Okay, so now it's time for our small group work activities that we mentioned or you heard mentioned earlier in some of the presentations and I spoke to you earlier. So when you arrived this evening, each of you received a small group work activity worksheet in your packet. You will use this to document and capture your individual thoughts and reactions. So what we want you to do is select a recorder and a facilitator at your table. The facilitator should facilitate the discussion, keep the group focused and on task so the work is completed in the allotted time, and share out the group's information if time permits. The recorder is responsible for completing the information requested on the official pink worksheet in the center of the table. Please make sure the information committed to the pink worksheet reflects the collective decision and general agreement and consensus of everyone at the table, not just the opinion of one or two individuals. Be sure to complete the information in the box in the upper right corner. This worksheet will then be collected at the conclusion of the session and used for verbatim transcription of your input to the district administration.
Groups time to discuss each of the 3 questions and record the group's consensus on the pink sheet. The facilitators, please keep your group on task. We will be calling out reminders to move on to the next question. After the discussion, each table will have time to share out their feedback from the pink sheet.
So it is now time to start our share. Wait, no, let's first. We're going to give you time to go ahead and discuss this. So, was there anything that we wanted to have? So, right now, if you want to start, kind of turn and start to discuss that first question.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to pause at this time. We want to ensure we have an opportunity for everyone to hear from each of our groups. As Clete had introduced in the beginning, we'd ask you to appoint a recorder and a reporter. Sometimes they're the same person, sometimes they're not. Just make sure your table is clear on the reporter. Okay, and here's how we're going to report out. We have 3 microphones. Melanie, Clete, and I will each kind of just go table to table. And we're going to ask you to report out first on task number 1, celebrations. And then we're going to go to task number 3, areas of resources, other ways to improve what we're doing. Number 2 is really just collecting that written feedback so that as our diversity advisory committee looks at the diversity inclusion statement, your thoughts can be incorporated. Just a reminder, all of the pink sheet, all of the things that you've put on your group's pink sheet, get recorded verbatim and posted on our website along with video of the presentation. In addition to the verbatim feedback that we get tomorrow. Okay? So again, although we will not listen to all thoughts tonight, we're going to listen to some of them, and then we'll collect thoughts also tomorrow morning when we repeat this session for the second time to a new audience. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to begin with task number 1. Something you heard tonight that should be celebrated. And we're going to ask you to ensure that we hear from every group one thing, not your entire, if you put more than one, I'm guessing you're presumptuous. One thing that should be celebrated from what you heard tonight. Clete, why don't we start with you?
Okay.
What did you hear tonight that should be celebrated? We talked about the district goal of diversifying staff, the district goal of remedying inequities, and the district outreach to hear from families.
Thank you. I'll leave it for you too.
One bullet point that we have is opening this conversation for our community helps drive away fears and encourage families to have honest conversations and take actions in their schools.
So one of the things on our list was hiring Dr. Weeks and having a diversity committee people committed to this full time. Apparently not. One of the things that we mentioned was really the fact that we're having an open conversation where we're getting to address the issue very openly.
So we celebrated the progress that the time, so we weren't talking about hay back in the 1970s now, it was, 2000, so we thought that was something to be celebrated.
We celebrate the courage of the families to speak to Dr. Weeks, and we also discussed how it's comforting and reaffirming that this conversation is happening.
At our table, we also have feedback. Well, it's mirrored in everybody else's feedback as well. We also identified the SEL curriculum as a positive step.
Our group talked about the priority areas. We felt like they were really appropriate, and we were glad that we had those identified.
Let's see, our table also said that the diversity and inclusion priority areas should be celebrated, especially the hiring practices and recognition of the problem of implicit biases.
Our table recognized, we'd like to see celebrate the hiring of a strong diversity and inclusion director. It's symbol of the district to have someone in that role of the caliber that you've got, and it's something to celebrate.
Thank you for sharing those celebrations. I concur with those. If we look back and where we're at, those really are celebrations for us. So we think about just really the commitment to really being straightforward about our deficits in this area and having somebody committed whose full-time job is to lead us through that is a true celebration. So we can celebrate starting the conversation tonight. And let's hope when we come back to our future focus 203 on this topic, we're celebrating accomplishments and achievements, right? So thank you for at least being a part of the initial conversation. We're going to move to task number 3 right now, where we're really asking for your help on how we really ensure that we are resourcing ourselves and our school district in a way that can make those movements that we need to make. So we need to hear from you. What other ways, what organizations can we build relationships? And what other ways can we work to raise awareness in the community? So we'll move to task number 3. Share some of your thoughts. Again, Cleve, we'll start with you.
We talked about bringing as experts, specifically an inclusion expert from the National Down Syndrome Society, also kids included together, teaching inclusive practices, www.kid.org. Gigi's Playhouse, we spoke about maybe contacting some church leaders. We stated that we are pleased that we're already using the NAACP, the Islamic Center of Naperville, and we'd like to see more of that happening.
Our focus was, we focused on the economically disadvantaged students, and we know that in the district there are 2 schools that are piloting breakfast programs, so we would like to see that continue, or if not, are there any other resources that can be done to make that come to existence. And we also so on our table also shared about students coming to school hungry and being asked to do schoolwork, testing. We know that's the last thing that's on their mind is trying to complete a test or an assignment.
We kind of brainstormed on some areas. One was like the physical accessibility of things. People have really challenges with that. Maybe the park district for that. Including the whole family, working with students that maybe language or barriers, whatever. There's university partnerships or mentorships, literacy of DuPage, parents as partners, and parents as teachers, extending those programs throughout the students' careers, and then also kind of similar to that table, people who are struggling for food or a consistent home environment like pads or those issues.
So an area that I really discussed was around how you get the diversity and inclusion that you want represented in the schools. Now, the staffing and recruitment is one challenge, but as an interim, we thought that finding groups of diverse mentors and bringing them into schools would be a very positive outcome on students. We also talked around disabilities and how that is part of the inclusion agenda and also diversity. And we have a lady that represents the Dyslexia Action Group, and very much feels very passionate around what that group can bring to the district. There's also a live teen drop-in centre and St. Timothy Boys and Girls Club.
Our group discussed how some of the materials are communicated with the community, especially since there's such a large Hispanic population, so maybe ensuring that all communication that comes from the district or all communication from the schools as well is in multiple languages, but since we have such a high Hispanic population, especially Spanish. We also discussed Latinx organizations. We didn't notice any on the slide, and we wondered if there were any, and if not, then how do we create that? And also, what are some barriers that Latinx families experience? Is it language? Is it work schedule? Is it childcare? And how can we overcome those barriers? We also discussed minority studies courses. We were talking a little bit about curriculum. We discussed how there's something to be said about seeing oneself represented and one's history exalted in their own classes. We also discussed LGBTQ+ curriculum as well, either history or through civil rights movement discussions or health class as well. I'm also DuPage United. We also discussed career days and having diverse adults attend those career days, and also more outreach to Latinx families.
So our table took a little bit of a different approach, and we actually questioned the decision to hold tomorrow's event at Compass Church, just because of the stance that the church takes on certain groups, in particular, like the LGBTQ+ community. And so we kind of felt like that was a little counterintuitive to what the mission of this is. So that was probably our biggest.
Struggle a little bit to get to this question we got kind of hung up on too. But one of the conversations we had was really around this idea that we have a lot of resources within our families, within our buildings, and how can we leverage those resources and what might we need in order to begin to have some of those conversations so that we can leverage what the people that are in our buildings every day.
As far as additional community organizations, we mentioned WDSRA to recognize and support kids with special needs. We also mentioned DuPage, children who are struggling with mental illness, Lions Club, Think College, the Urban League. As far as what additional ways to better support, we talked about taking a more diversified approach with the Junior Achievement Initiative, having more opportunities for presentations and open and honest conversations, especially at the middle school level, to talk about all differences for both students and for staff development.
All the other groups talked about the groups that we had talked about adding already, but we did have a discussion about the importance of, once you have all these groups that you're collaborating with, making sure that families in the community are also aware of those partnerships and can learn from them as well.
Our group focused on additional ways we can support through data, awareness about diversity and inclusion. Some of those ways are collecting data on students of color and how many are in accelerated classes on our classes, et cetera, as well as data on suspensions and behaviors, because as many of you know, the Department of Ed has tracked this for decades, that minorities, particularly black males, as well as children with disabilities, tend to be suspended and suffer other behavior consequences that white students do not for equivalent behavior, as well as trying to collect data on inclusion for special needs students in what percentage they may be in the classroom, as well as how meaningful it is in terms of this relates really back to the point of the presentation about the really letting them participate.
Thank you so much for your feedback, and let's make sure that we get those stink sheets collected. Whoever has those, make sure we don't walk out with those so we can consolidate that information and use it as we begin to plan moving forward. The Focus 203 sessions are intended to solicit your ideas, your hopes, your dreams, your thoughts about our school district, about our community, to help us with our roadmap moving forward for our continuous improvement. And tonight is an important part of that conversation, without question. Please hold us accountable to the topic that we discussed tonight, feedback we received to you, and the initiatives that Dr. Leak shared with you as we move forward. These are important priorities of the Board of Education. There are 3 Board of Education members here this evening as part of the conversation. Others will be present tomorrow. So it is one of their priorities and to which they will be accountable as well. So you can help me. I appreciate your help with this. Thank you again for being here. Please join me in thanking both Dr. Dalton and Dr. Leaks. Please give Melanie Manning, our community volunteers, to step forward and share our engagement series. And there are a number of community members and committee members that are here tonight too, so I thank them for being here. Appreciate you being a part of the conversation. I hope you found it worthwhile. And sometime before it gets too late tonight, you text or call someone who should be a part of the conversation tomorrow. So thanks for being here tonight. Have a safe drive home.